Hi, hello. It's Christmas morning, and you know what that means? I have nothing to do because I'm a middle aged woman with an adult child and no grandchild. So I'm going to read a book and then I'm going to come back and talk to you guys about it. The book I'm reading today is called The September House by Cassandra Orlando. See, there's the cover. Ominous, not really. It's just a house. It's got about 336 pages in it. I should probably have it done today or tomorrow, then I can come tell you guys about it. So, first, let me tell you the synopsis written on the back of the book so you'll know what we're going to be talking about. When Margaret and her husband Hal bought the large Victorian house on Hawthorne Street for sale at a surprisingly reasonable price, they couldn't believe they finally had a home of their own. Then they discovered the hauntings. Every September, the walls would drip blood, the ghosts of former inhabitants appeared, and all of them are terrified by something that lurks in the basement. Most people would flee. Margaret is not most people. After 4 years, Margaret has learned to live with the house. It's her house, after all, but Hal can't take it anymore and he leaves abruptly. Now he's not returning calls, and their daughter, Catherine, who knows nothing about the apparitions, arrives in town looking for her missing father. To make things worse, September has just begun. And with each attempt by Margaret and Catherine to find Hal, the hauntings grow more harrowing because there are some secrets the house needs to keep. So I'm going to go read this and pretend to be festive and jolly for, as I'll say, Thanksgiving for Christmas, and then I'll come back and tell you what I thought about it and also break it down. Okay, see you then. Bye. Okay, so I'm back and I have finished reading The September House by Carissa Orlando. I started it on Christmas Day. I actually finished it a few days ago. It's just that with Christmas and everything, and this being my first like YouTube video ever, I had to learn some stuff. So I want to go over what happens in the book and then like my thoughts and feelings on it really fast. So the book starts out kind of quaint, and the narration is by this woman called Margaret, and she is just the sweetest lady ever. Just how she talks about things, how she talks about people, it's amazing. And she talks about how when her and her husband Hal, he sells a couple books, and they buy this house with turrets in this Victorian house, and it's like their dream house. Girl, it'd be my dream house too. I've always wanted a house with turrets, but I just live in a regular suburban home. And she is completely in love with this house. But Hal, not so much. But he likes that he has his own office in there so he can keep writing and doing his like author stuff. And so they buy this house and they notice something's a little off with it. Like when they're talking to the the real estate agent was like, I have to disclose to you that people have died in this house. And, um, but it's like a Victorian house. It's a couple hundred years old. Someone's going to have died in this house at some point. So they don't think anything of it. And then during the tour of the house, though, they're like going into the basement, and the real estate agent will not go in the basement. And Margaret's like, "Oh yeah, we went down there. It just didn't feel right, and it smelled weird, and so we just weren't into going into the basement." And then they talked about a little bit about how they would have to refinish it and all of this stuff, but they never actually get around to refinishing the basement, and that comes into play later. But it does smell kind of musty down there, and so they just don't like being down there. And there's so that happens, and they buy this house and they live there, and everything seems okay, just a little off. And then September happens and things get wild in that house. Like the ghosts or the pranksters, or she has other names for them, start coming out. There's like children, there's one that bites her. There's a lady who lives in the fireplace, and if they ever light a fire, she starts screaming. And the weirdest thing about the house is in the beginning of September, blood starts falling down the wall. And then by the end of September, there's just blood. It's just the house just bleeds all the time. And this is in September. The paranormal activity gets the worst, but Margaret, she's so cute about it. She never refers to it as paranormal activity. She just, oh, she's adorable. So they've lived there a few years, her and Hal, and
she has just gotten used to it, and she has her neighbor Millie that she talks to all the time, and Millie knows all about the hauntings, and Millie knows all about the ghosts. She even knows some of their names. She even knows Francesca. Francesca is like their housekeeper ghost that has like a gash in her face from being like hit by an axe, and so you the ghostly or the apparitions end up looking the way that they looked when they died. So Francesca looks creepy. But Margaret pretends like it's no big deal. And so does Millie, her best friend, who lives down the street or next door. She says she lives next door, but it's a farmhouse, so it can't be that close, right? But so Millie can see the ghosts and see the children. There's lots of children ghosts. Um, and they talk about them like it's no big deal, like it's not paranormal. It's just, it is what it is at their house. But Hal is done. He's over it. He cannot stand this house anymore, and he leaves. He runs away. And before September can start. And so, right at the beginning of September, her daughter keeps calling her, and she's like, "Mom, where's Dad? Where's Dad?" I was calling his phone, and it would just ring, and now it's just going straight to voicemail. Like his cell phone's dead. And Margaret, for a few days, of maybe a few weeks, she like is always like, "Oh, Hal's sleeping. Oh, Hal's busy." She even pretends to go to Hal's office and is like, "Hey, or your daughter's on the phone. Do you want to talk to her?" Katerina or Catherine's on the phone. Do you want to talk to her? And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Your dad's busy right now writing his book. He'll call you later." And she never does. And so Catherine, is that her name? Catherine gets like super upset and flies out to wherever her parents live in Empire. I don't think it ever says the state, but this is the first time she's ever been to her parents' house because she does not like her dad. And there was an incident where she got taken away from her parents and had to go live with her auntie. And so her auntie pretty much raised her. And so this is the first time that she's been to her parents' house. And Margaret is like telling Millie and like flipping out because she's like, she's gonna see the pranksters. She's gonna try to hang stuff in her closet, and the like ghost that lives in her closet's gonna frighten her and all this stuff. And she's just like really, really worried about her daughter. But her daughter is really worried about finding her dad. So her daughter arrives, and um, she goes to file a missing persons report, and her mom just seems completely nonplussed about it. Just does not care whatsoever about filing an on missing persons report because she doesn't really like her husband, and there's reasons for that. He's an abusive, terrible human, and he used to beat her, and that's actually why her daughter got taken away and had to go live with her auntie because he beat her so bad one night, and she called her sister and was like, "Come get her." So that's why there's like a weird tension. And but Margaret, because she's just been abused for so long, she's just so okay with it, and makes excuses. And she's like, "You just have to follow these rules." She's really into rules. And so, anyways, her daughter comes out, and she's like going through her dad's office to try to find anything. And all of his drawers in his cupboards are locked in his office. And she asks her mom for the key, and her mom's like, "I don't have a key." And so she just starts like busting open these drawers and finding just bottles and bottles and bottles of whiskey. And she's like, "When did Dad start drinking again?" And Margaret's like, "I don't know." But she knows it's when they moved into a haunted house and everything just became too much for him to deal with. So he went back to drinking. And so she's like, "I don't know. He's like that sometimes," because Margaret's just the cutest old lady ever. And their voice is so just adorable, very distinct between her and Millie and her daughter and Francesca. So Chris Orlando did an amazing job with every character having a very, very distinct voice. And Margaret's voice is very, very, very distinct and just gentle. And so, anyways, back to the story. So the daughter is like, "I'm going to find Dad. I'm going to go to all of these bars and I'm going to look for him." And she goes around to these bars and people are like, "No, we haven't seen your dad," blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, realizes, "Oh, yeah, Dad drinks alone." he probably goes to cheap hotels. And so she goes around to a couple of cheap hotels and finds out that he had been staying at this one. And she like lets the police know, and they're like, he's a grown up, he can do whatever he wants. You know, that whole thing about when grown ups go missing, they are allowed to go missing. And so they check the bank records, and right before Hal runs away, he makes an undisclosed withdrawal. It just says a large withdrawal. I don't think it ever says the actual amount. And so they're like, yeah, he's living off of that, and he's just like wandering around. And so they do some investigative work, and the daughter finds the hotel that he was staying at, and she like talks to the like proprietor of the hotel and was like, oh yeah, he stayed here for 2 nights, or maybe it was one night, and then he left, but all of his stuff is still here. He never came back and got his stuff, so he never really checked out. He just left one night. And they live in this small town. I'm thinking it's New England for some reason, but they live in this small town that has like very few taxi services. And they find out from the taxi driver that he did pick Hal up and dropped him off like down the street from the house. And so what Hal was going to do was burn down the house. And because he was so afraid of the like monsters and demons and ghosts and pranksters and tricksters and everything that's living in his house. So he was going to burn down his own house. And he ends up going down, and he's going to start in the basement because that's where Master Vale, he was the old owner of the house, and that's who all the little prankster kid ghosts are afraid of Master Vale. So he starts down in the basement, and he dies. Not Master Vale. Hal's dead in the basement. And they find this out, and the cops come. Oh, and I should probably mention that this whole time there's just flies coming out of the basement all the time. And when the daughter tries to open the door, flies fly out, and there's Bible pages all over the basement door. And Margaret hurries and shuts the door. It's like, you have to follow the rules. The rules are you can't open the door. And then she pukes flies everywhere. And so her daughter's like, are you eating the flies? And she's like, no, I'm not eating the flies, but there's all these flies in the basement. And usually when there's a dead body, flies love dead bodies. So, anyways, the cops show up. And the cops are there, and they are talking to Margaret. And Margaret is telling them everything. She's telling about how they have a priest that comes out and does blessings. And the cops are like, I'm sorry, but did you know that priest actually convinced a lot of people that their houses were haunted, and he himself has like Alzheimer's? And she's like, what? Because she wanted them to call and be like, call the priest and he'll tell you that he's had to come out here and bless this house. And so they start talking to her, and they're like, remember these 3 words, and doing all these like Alzheimer's tests and cognitive tests with her. And she's just failing them all miserably because she's too busy like seeing these ghosts and these apparitions. And they're like, name these 3 words. But she can't because there's like one of the like trickster kid got like goes in front of her, and one of them is biting her, and she just can't answer any of these questions. And so one of the cops goes down into the basement, and he's like, you guys need to call emergency services. There is a dead body down here. Hal's dead body is down in the basement. And so they call for backup and emergency services, and they're like talking to Margaret. And then you as a reader are convinced that she does just has Alzheimer's, and none of this is real because um, no one in the house can see like the tricksters. And even her daughter's like, yeah, she's always just staring off into space, and she's always looking at things that aren't there. And when the cops is like, is there someone else in the room with us right now? And it's one of the little prankster kids, and she's like, no. Even though she can see it, that's when she realizes that the cops can't see it. So they go, and that happens, and they are going to arrest Margaret because She literally has her husband dead in her basement. And so, as they're arresting her, the house goes mad violent, like the ghost kids go crazy, the house starts bleeding, it starts shaking. One of the cops ends up dying, and I don't know how to explain it, but the end, because you're so convinced that this house is haunted, then the cops have you convinced that Margaret has Alzheimer's. But then at Night Shyamalan twist, the house is mad haunted, and it's like killing cops. And the book ends with um, Margaret sitting on the patio because she decides she's not even going to leave the house. Nope, she's going to stay there. They're like, yeah, the I think that it ends up coming out that her husband killed himself in the basement or something. That she didn't actually kill him; he killed himself, and he tried to light the basement on fire. Um, and so Margaret's sitting on her porch talking to her friend Millie, and the cops come to talk to her about something. And oh no, that's not what happens. What happens is she finds out Millie's not real. This whole time you think Millie's real. As the reader, you think Millie is real. And they're like telling, she's like, oh, ask, since they tried to ask the priest, she's like, ask my neighbor Millie. They're like, you don't have a next door neighbor. They're like, go outside. There's nothing but fields and dairy farms forever all around you. You do not have anyone. The nearest house closest to you is like 10 miles or something away. No one can just walk up your driveway and hang out. And so you start thinking she is batshit crazy, and you start feeling really, really bad for her because all this stuff comes up about her husband being super abusive and her losing her kid. Um, and that, she has come to just follow all these rules, and she just has the voice of just a very abused woman. And you start really, really thinking she has Alzheimer's, but it turns out the house is actually haunted and it kills cops. And so she just stays in the house because she's used to violence. She's used to just everything being crazy all around her. And so her just calm narration through even talking about and minimizing the physical abuse her husband put her through, the physical abuse that the ghost put her through, the physical abuse the house puts her through, the mental anguish the house puts her through. She just minimizes it because that's just how life is. And so her house being abusive is just, part of life. So that's what happens. You find out that she's not crazy. Her house is actually haunted. And it is the weirdest haunted house book because as you're reading it, it follows a lot of haunted house tropes with like haunted kids. For some reason, there's always haunted kids. But she embraces them and talks to them. And then the haunted, like, housekeeper is very reminiscent of American Horror Story or whatever. So that's how it is. That's how the book ends. Is another twist that her neighbor was never real. So it's such a good book with the like how it's written on the writing style because Margaret is just so polite in the narration. She constantly downplays how haunted her house is, but as the reader, you are experiencing it just massive violence and just gashed heads and eyeballs and blood everywhere. And she's just like, oh, everything's fine. And then she talks about her grocery list. And so it's just an interesting read. And so that brings us back to the like unreliable narrator part of books. And Margaret is both a reliable and unreliable narrator because she's unreliable because she downplays everything, but she's actually telling you everything that's going on. But then you think she's an unreliable narrator because the cops and her daughter have you as the reader thinking that she has Alzheimer's, but then it turns out that she's legit. She lives in a haunted house that kills people. And so then has corpses in her basement. But I think the saddest part is that her one friend is not even real. This person that she confides in, because she doesn't ever talk to anybody about her family. She hardly ever talks to her daughter, but she talks to her homegirl Millie all the time. And you find out Millie's not real, but she's so real in the book. And then to find out that she's not real, I think that really, really bothered me. So I don't know. I think this book is a really, really good read. It was a quick read. I think I finished it. I started it on Christmas Day and I had it done by Boxing Day. And so it's a really good book. And if we're going to talk about like haunted house books, it's, I've read a lot. And this one is really great because it just doesn't follow, it follows the tropes but in a different way. I think it's because of Margaret's narration and because the disappointing part at the end when you find out that Millie, her best friend, isn't real and that her husband Hal was a POS that used to beat her. And that's why she is just so okay with ghosts just living in her house and just acting obnoxious and are actually kind of violent towards her sometimes. And there's cute things that the ghosts do, like move things around and stack pillows in weird places or whatever. But then there's also ghosts that like attack her. And then there's the like Master Vale that lives in the basement that the kids are afraid of. And so, and she just normalizes it all because she's an abused woman. And so I think it's a haunted house story, but it's also a deeper like conversation of like abuse and how people just normalize it. And I think that it's a good, it makes the book even so much more deeper. Like, because it's a book about domestic violence essentially, and just it being normalized and rationalized and how it can escalate to homicide. And then, so I think Carissa Orlando wrote a haunted house book, but to me, it's more of a domestic violence horror story allegory. And so I the writing style is really great. I'm not a writing critique person. I don't give things much stars. I'm not on Goodreads because I once got into a fight on Goodreads. So I would recommend this book. Not to just horror fans, but to anybody. And it's an easy, easy read. And the way that it's written, it just goes by, it just flies by. And so um yeah, I would definitely recommend the September House. So this is my first video. Now I have to go learn how to edit a video, and I will see you next week. I'm not sure what I'm reading. I will. Okay, so if you read this book, tell me what you think about it, and if you think it was more so about domestic violence, or if I'm just way off base on that, or if it was just a haunted house story. And would you recommend this to people? And please be kind to me. This is my first this type of YouTube video. The ones I had made in the past were educational ones, and they were like my thoughts and opinions, and I didn't have to really write scripts for it. It was just like, this is how you do this, and this is how you do this. So thanks for watching.